Appreciate you guys clicking on today's video. I'm going to be breaking down a clip from a podcast I was watching with Jordan Peterson being the host, and he brought on Dr. Phil. It is pretty funny watching them duke it out over this podcast.
We're permanently ignorant because we actually can't predict the future. The future is actually not predictable. The world is not deterministic, and we know this for a number of reasons, many of which are scientific. So we have to move forward in faith. And so the monotheistic hypothesis is that there's an ultimate unity and also that's what we should have faith in. And so I want to run something by you and you tell me what you think about this. So
This is the part of the video that I found really fascinating. And when I grew up, the idea of unity and pointing yourself in one ultimate direction was very foundational to my Christian beliefs. And so now I'm hearing it from Jordan Peterson. He's explaining that like all these rules, they point in this direction. Everything you do should be pointed in this direction. And this is what's going to get you the best results. And he's asking, Dr. Phil, what do you think about this? And Dr. Phil elaborates in a really fascinating way. The spin-off that he has adds another level of complexity to it that I find incredible.
There's an autobiographical account in the Gospels of one of Christ's reactions to a particular question. And so he's being tormented by the scribes and the Pharisees and the lawyers. So nothing's really changed. The Pharisees are hypocrites, the scribes are academics, and the lawyers, well, they're still lawyers. And what they're essentially trying to do continually in the gospel account is to trap Christ into making a heretical statement so that they can have him arrested and destroyed. And so they're attempting to reputation savage, essentially. And so at one point, this is a very famous scene, and I'm sure you know it, one of his opponents challenges Jesus to describe which of the commandments is the primary commandment. And the hope there is that he'll pick one, and by picking one will denigrate the others. And because he's denigrating the others in comparison, they can bring him up on charges of heresy. And he says something quite remarkable. He says that the 10 Commandments are manifestations of an underlying unity of moral conceptualization, and that they circulate around a particular theme. And the theme, you can express the theme quite concisely in a twofold manner. You should aim at what's best, God. You should align yourself with the highest possible aim. That's number one. So that orients you. And then number two, you should treat other people as you would like to be treated. You should put yourself in their position and work for that harmonious unity that would emerge if you treated other people the way you would want to be treated if you were treating yourself properly.
And this right here gets misinterpreted a lot throughout the world. What I'm hearing from Jordan Peterson, what he's explaining in an elegant way, is that the ultimate goal that God has assigned us, not him, God has said to align ourselves with him. And he has given us a set of boundaries and rules and laws that he says, when followed, will give you the most alignment with God. You'll be closest to me in the way that I behave, act, and expect things to be done. And the second part is also interesting. He almost makes it as important to treat your neighbors and the people you're sharing the world with as well as yourself. Literally to treat them as you would yourself, because they are sharing the same experience on this plane with us.
So it's interesting. So really what he's doing, it's so interesting. He's taking a cloud of conception, which is the 10 Commandments, which were themselves derived from an analysis. It's an analysis, like you said, you conducted in some ways by listening to the tens of thousands of comments that you've received from the people who've been watching and listening to what you've been doing. You accumulated all of this cries from the people, let's say. You derive a set of principles as a consequence of that, but those principles themselves orient around something that's central. That central point of orientation, I think, is equivalent to God, and it's also equivalent to what we should have faith in.
So he elaborates really well and says that our central core beliefs have to be in Jesus Christ and God himself. We have to make that everything we are aligning ourselves toward. And then beyond that, there are rules that we can comply and further bring ourselves closer to that unity of God. Everything is pointed in that direction. It's literally the center of the universe. And we all just have to comply with the things that'll bring us closer to that goal.
And so I would say, you tell me what you think of it. This is where the question is. Now, you outlined a set of problems, attack on free speech, faith, and family, and then you identified 10 working principles. So what do you think of the idea that that which you have faith in, and I'm speaking personally here, that which you have faith in is equivalent to the spirit that all of these principles point to? You see what I mean? That there's an underlying unity there that makes those principles coherent. Does that strike you as plausible?
It does strike me as plausible, and I leave room for that to be defined differently by each person that is sorting through the events of their life.
So this is a guy named Hoe Math. Really recommend checking out his channel. Great breakdowns, hand-drawn. It's all really creative stuff. He goes over things like this, which is high and low levels of consciousness. He breaks it down really, really well.
Before I get started, I should say that higher does not always mean better. Some people watch my videos where I talk about my mistakes and they say, "Oh, you think you're at a high level? You sound like a jerk." But higher doesn't mean better person. It means more aware. So here's the lower level of awareness, seeing things.
It's hard to see.
And then as you go higher in the levels of awareness, it becomes much more complex. You're seeing people, seeing almost into infinity.
So basically all he's talking about is the higher up in consciousness you go, the more you're able to be aware of. So I think about it like this. If I'm talking to another person and that person has a problem, if I have a higher level of consciousness, I'm going to be able to look at that person, identify what issues they have, where they grew up, the situation around the way that they think, and then I'll be able to acknowledge that and then respond in a way that'll give them a good result from our interaction. Not a way that's going to be selfish, as if I'm isolating, everything is about me, and I'm going to be the problem and I want the solutions. I'm able to see that, oh, this person's lived their own life experience with their own filter through life, and I see that and I'm aware of that, and I'm able to kind of, there's not really a great word for it, but curate your response to that person so that you can give them that good experience. And I think this is what Dr. Phil is trying to imply and inject into this conversation of the ultimate unity of God and us all trying to get to that direction and be as close to him as possible. But on top of that, we have all lived our own life experiences, and when we're interacting with others, we have to curate our responses to these people that will ultimately get them in that direction.
The reason personal truth is so important in getting to that unifying principle is we generate the results in life we think we deserve. And so if we think we're a second-class citizen, if we think we don't measure up to everybody else in some way, we're going to generate the results that are consistent with that. This will sound arrogant, but I think most people are capable of doing this. There are certain people I can see just walking down the sidewalk, and without any other information than just what I'm looking at, there are certain things that I know about that person. I mean, if there's somebody that doesn't take care of themselves, their clothes are unkept, doesn't matter how nice they are, it's just they're unkept. They're kind of heads down, they're shuffling along. It just seems like every step is barely what they can do. I know for one thing for certain in my mind is that person has a damaged personal truth because they're generating that existence in their life. And they're not walking with their head up and their shoulders back. They're not out in the middle of the sidewalk. They're just kind of skulking along the side. They're generating exactly what they think they deserve. And I think that 80% of society can wind up in that role if they feel guilty about what they think and believe.
This is why I love Jordan Peterson's book. I think I might even try out Dr. Phil's book and read that as well. I think these ideas and principles are all pointing towards leadership, a factor we have failed at in our society, absolutely crippled us too. And I mean, I look out at my own local situation and I can very rarely spot good leaders, and I want to start pushing these examples of great leadership and good charismatic qualities and examples of just strong men in general and putting those up to the forefront. I actually noticed a trend. You can't even search for a hashtag men on YouTube or social media because of the state of things right now. And whatever, I don't think we need a hashtag online necessarily, but it does show you the state of the world and that we need better leaders.
We elaborated on the idea that, you elaborated out a set of principles and that there's a unifying theme behind them. And then you said you bought that explanation, but then you pointed to the fact that other people may come to the table with a different set of principles. And so there's a way that the universal particularizes itself in each life. There's an Old Testament account of the prophet Elijah, and Elijah is the first prophet who posits that God is the voice of conscience. Now, and you made the case, at least by inference, that people are blessed with the ability to establish a relationship with something that calls to them from within. That might happen in a different way for each person. I mean, that's really the difference between people's personality and their temperament. Then you made the case that if they deviate from that, that becomes so obvious that you can even see it in their day-to-day behavior. You can see it when you're watching people when you walk down the street. Dr. Phil, one of the things I've noticed is that most people don't watch other people when they walk down the street, right? They look at the ground or they're in their own little bubble. I mean, if you watch people on the street, you can get an eyeful of who they are very, very rapidly. And, if people are particularly angry and bitter and they're walking down the street and you pay attention to them, that actually sometimes makes them angry, which is why people will avoid eye contact, because you reflect back to them the hell that they've trapped themselves in. And they find that very unpleasant.
And the only solution to this is to promote the idea of self-growth and be better and invest in yourself. Become the superhero of the story, be the main character, become a good leader because society needs them and people as individuals need it for themselves to become happy and content with the world and the local situation around them.
Part of the reason I wrote in my first book, I wrote the injunction to people to stand up straight with their shoulders back, was to reflect in the microcosm of their behavior an orientation upward and towards what the good was, and that is embedded in everything that people do and every glance they make and every step they take forward.
It just seems like the more you do to align yourself with God, the happier you'll be, the more fulfilled you'll be, the more mentally put together you will have become by that time. It's the act of getting to Christ and getting to God that gets you to the place where you can actually be fulfilled and happy. I don't know. That's my goal. That's pretty much all I got for this one, guys. I appreciate you watching this far into the video. Please drop a like, hit the comments, let me know what you think. I'd love to go over some of your thoughts, and I'd love to see you in the next video. Peace.